we're getting some on the other side.
Maybe one day.
Think Bob's boat needed buffing or something?
He's going, he's too close.
Gotcha.
He's up in help me now.
Dan, I see you're just like Rob.
That's nice to know.
I'm catching you.
It says right there. I'm just like.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dan. It's not a good thing. It's honestly not my hair department.
That's what we're doing.
Correct.
Group's getting smaller and smaller.
Especially when there's National League of Cities illnesses. How'd you get away with just one item tonight? Okay, John, come on.
Patrick.
Oh, really? Where's he going?
On Valley Com.
Good for him.
Hard time hanging on to staff over. I tell you, leadership. Yeah.
Daryl, ouch. We can think it, but we just don't say it. Yes. Is it 2 weeks?
Do we notice?
Huh?
Oh, isn't it?
You forward that on to me.
Yeah, we just finished hiring network engineer and scooter. Train yet, doesn't it?
You're gonna put a motor on that thing, John.
Well, I've already crashed it a couple times, so I don't think I need a motor to. It'd make it more fun for my grandson, though. My apologies, I'm sorry I'm late.
That's okay. Okay, I guess we'll call the meeting to order. Danny, would you take the roll?
Deputy Mayor Baggett.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember DeCoursey.
Here.
Councilmember Holmes.
Here.
Councilmember Pelosa.
I think he's coming, but he may be late.
Councilmember Troutman Manuel.
She's excused, she's in Washington.
And Councilmember Wales.
Here.
Okay, welcome everybody. Do we have any announcements, reports, or presentations tonight, Danny?
No, sir.
Thank you. I guess we'll start off with agenda items for the council discussion. Ordinance number 6671. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Amber Price, Engineering Aide with the Community Development and Public Works Department. City initiated right-of-way vacation B1-17 is for vacation of approximately 3,000 square feet of right-of-way located in the vicinity of 1412 3rd Street Southeast. Specifically, the right-of-way is located between M Street Southeast and R Street Southeast, south of 3rd Street Southeast. It's shown in red on the map on the screen and on page 8 of 106 of your agenda packet. The 50 by 60 foot portion of real property was acquired by the city for the intended purposes of right-of-way and was quitclaim deeded to the city in 1956. The city has determined that the intent of the city's acquisition was for right-of-way purposes based on the alignment with other similar right-of-way that was dedicated for street purposes. These similar pieces were subsequently vacated years later when the city long-range transportation plans determined that it was no longer needed for the alignment of 4th Street, and that the unopened partial alignments could be considered for vacation. Benefits of approving the vacation include a decreased potential maintenance obligation and liability to the city, and the area would be subject to property taxes. Community development staff public works staff and other city departments and utility purveyors have reviewed the right-of-way and support vacation with no conditions. Because the right-of-way vacation is city-initiated and was originally obtained by the city at no cost to the city, it's never been maintained or opened for public use. Staff is recommending that compensation not be required for this right-of-way. The public hearing to hear public testimony is scheduled for March 19th at the next City Council meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
So it goes back to it goes to the homeowner whose roof is partially covered?
Generally, the city doesn't determine who it goes back to. We just vacate it per the state statute, but it usually goes back to the property from which it came. In this case, it would be that adjacent property.
Do they have any problem picking it up and paying the additional property taxes?
I have not asked that question.
Maybe it's not appropriate at this time, I just wondered. Yeah, okay.
I think they actually are supportive of this.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Jeez.
And we have ordinance number 6674.
And I'll just stay up here for that one as well, too.
Double hitter tonight.
Ordinance number 6674 is for franchise agreement number 17-22 for Olympic Pipeline Company LLC. It's for an existing petroleum products distribution pipeline that currently is in the city's right-of-way on the West Hill in North Auburn. Let me get that map up for you. It runs through the West Hill and then up through North Auburn. It's also shown on page 34 of 106 of your agenda packet. Olympic previously had a public way agreement for this pipeline, which has recently expired. A review of that agreement has determined that the language was outdated and that the language used in a recent franchise agreement with another pipeline would be more appropriate for this agreement. Olympic has applied for the franchise agreement for a term of 10 years to continue to operate their system running through the city. The agreement requires that Olympic obtain construction permits so that they can make repairs, upgrades, and improvements to their existing facilities. These permits are reviewed, approved, and managed through the city's permitting processes. Currently, Olympic's facilities don't serve any customers in Auburn, and they don't have any plans to serve any customers at this time. And their public hearing is scheduled for March 19th at the next City Council meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions on this agreement.
Any questions? Councilmember Wales.
It's above ground?
There are portions that are below ground, I believe. Most of it is below ground.
Councilmember Wales.
A couple of years ago, though I'm getting old fast, maybe 20 years ago, didn't Olympic Pipeline up north in Marysville in that area have an explosion? What are we doing to make sure that this is well maintained, or do we have no obligation to do that?
Pipeline safety is actually regulated by the Utilities and Transportation Commission, so they handle all of that. The pipeline company does frequently send us information on what they inspect and their safety protocols and that sort of thing, though. So,
Thank you.
How old is that pipeline that's currently there?
this one was built in 1965. I know that they have done some upgrades and work as required along their pipeline. We get notices, and they apply for permits every now and then.
How often do they usually perform testing?
I believe they do it annually.
Do they?
Yeah, we get notification usually annually that we get some sort of documents that they're out there looking at something and testing stuff.
Yeah, the big concern, I know that going through a lot of people's mind when they start running petroleum products and things like that, gases through pipelines, is the potential, as Councilmember Wales pointed out, for explosion and things of that nature. So we just, I think most of the ones that we've heard about so far have been ones that were not inspected as they should have been. So I just hope that everything continues. Yes, Larry.
Yeah, and I hear you on the where it occurred, but I had something happen at my job on the same day, and it was in Bellingham, and it was tragic what occurred. Burned up some kids that were playing in a creek. But under section 14, emergency management, leaks, ruptures, and emergency response, in the current contract, does the Valley Fire Authority have, and the police department, have the same ability to request, meeting with Olympic Pipeline to, because that's a provision within that contract, I believe.
In the previous agreement?
Yeah, is it?
Yes.
And does that meeting take place? Do you know?
I'm going to defer to Ingrid on that question.
Okay.
Yeah, so if VRFA or PD or the city want to meet with the applicant, then we certainly set those up. It doesn't happen frequently. Again, this pipeline has been in place for quite some time, and Olympic has been doing what's necessary under the regulatory requirements for them to do the inspections on the line.
So the city hasn't recently, that you know of,
Not that I'm aware of.
called for that? Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wales.
I'm glad you're here, Ingrid, because you can create a frame for me to.
Sure.
This goes through our city. We have no city residents that receive service from this, and we don't charge anything for them to. Is that what we do with most of these franchises, is just let them pass through us?
So there's an application fee that they pay, and then the way the franchise is written is we have the ability to actually charge them for our administrative time throughout the year, for any time that we spend dealing with the franchise or responding to issues. So there are ways for us to recover the actual costs that we expend towards managing the franchise.
Thank you.
Councilmember
So
Bose.
Ingrid, what is the fee, initial fee?
The application fee is $5,000.
It was $5,000 when they applied. It's since gone up, but.
One-time deal?
Every 5 years, or
In
whenever
this
they're
case, 10
renewing.
years.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you both. We'll move along to the Lake Haven Auburn Sewer Boundary Adjustment.
Good evening, my name is Bob Elwell. I'm the sewer utility engineer for the city of Auburn, and I'm here to talk about the proposed modification to the boundary between the sewer service areas with Lake Haven
Good evening,
and the city
welcome.
of Auburn. This modification, and, oh, it shows it up there. This is up in the Jovita Heights area, and it would add an additional 19 parcels. They're shown in green. There's an area map that's included in your packet as well. Back in 2005, as this Jovita Heights area development, which is shown in blue on the map, that the service area was modified at that time to encompass all of those parcels. And then as a result of that, there was infrastructure that was built that went from approximately West Valley Highway up the hill and then throughout that development. Once that was built, this proposed amendment would allow the parcels, especially the ones that are located on the west side of 56th Avenue, to connect directly to these sewer mains that were already put in there. So this is something that some of the residents or property owners up there have been asking Lake Haven about, and then Lake Haven has asked us about, and then there's been enough momentum that Lake Haven's decided that it would be advantageous to transfer those properties to Auburn as far as the sewer service goes. And so that's the proposal. So your packet includes Resolution 5353, which we intend to bring next week unless there's some objections, and that would authorize the mayor to enter into, or basically sign an amendment to the agreement that modifies the area. So these would become Auburn sewer customers.
So it's just those 19 parcels there
Yes.
that are involved, none of the area in the blue at all?
The area in the blue are already customers of Auburn, so
Yeah.
that's an adjustment that was made previously. This is really it's almost an identical adjustment as well, just there are, yes. Oh, sorry.
Councilmember Wales.
So the green is in the city of Auburn.
Portions of the green are. The part that, the smaller lots that are to the west of 56th are in King County. The 3 lots to the north are within the city limits of Auburn.
Councilmember Wales.
Does sewer with Lake Haven include water service too?
We do have agreements between water and sewer, but the 2 boundaries are independent of one another. So up there, it's all Lake Haven water.
Any other questions? Councilmember DeCoursey.
Well, I assume this is going to be a physical connection to hook up our sewer system.
The connection would essentially be between each individual lot, and the sewer mains are located in 56, so they're already there.
Okay.
So it would be a physical connection from the lot to the sewer main.
The reason I ask is there a charge to the property owner for the connection for the fee?
Yes, there's a system development charge, a permit fee, and then once they're connected, there's a charge to, a monthly service charge.
Councilmember Wales.
Is it in our best interest to pick up another area that isn't part of Auburn? And why do they want to leave Lake Haven?
The Lake Haven sewer, even though that's their Lake Haven sewer service area, they don't have any facilities in that area, and it would be, they're projecting kind of years out before they would have any. They'd need a pump station and a significant extension of their system. These lots we were able to look at and see that we wouldn't have to extend sewer mains into King County right-of-way at all. It's all within our right-of-way. And so, and just the way the terrain lies, it made physical sense to make those connections. And so,
Councilmember Wales.
And they're absorbing all the costs. The homeowners will absorb all of the costs of the hookups.
yes.
Any other questions? Councilmember
This
Pelosi.
is kind of a statement. Hi, Bob. So it'll be a funding positive for the city.
It will increase revenues by however many connect.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Okay, fourth quarter 2017 financial report. Yes, ma'am.
Thought there was one more, sorry.
Heard you mowed the lawn and washed 2 cars. I'm bringing my car over tomorrow.
Put all my slides for you also. It's over here. Starting here. So we can go through the slides. What we have before you is a cash basis 2017 year-end results. And the first slide we have, before I get into the executive summary, I'm going to show you this chart that shows first the revenues here. Those are the revenues, and you can see that the blue bar is our budget. The green bar is what we actually received. If there's a red bar, that means we did not make budget. And where we did not make budget is in our intergovernmental revenue. We're down a little bit. That has to do with the timing of our COPS grants. We have 2 of them. We hired police officers. They pay a portion of the police officer's salary for about 3 years. And we didn't get the officers hired as quickly as we thought we would be. So it's a reimbursement grant. When the grant is done in 3 years, the city picks up the full cost of the officer. And I think we did 3 and 3 in the 2 different budget cycles. Maybe we did 6. I can't remember back that far, but it's because we didn't get the officers hired as quickly. And then the next one where we're showing a little bit of red is development service fees. and that is our building permits. We were below budget this year, about almost $400,000. Just not that much. Not that activity is slow, but it hasn't been as high as we'll see in previous years when we look at the 5-year chart. And then the other one, other fees and charges, again, that's our planning fees, development fees, plan review fees, and those were down accordingly also. We don't have the plan review fees, we generally look at, those come before the permit fees, so they kind of went hand in hand, and those were down. The development service fees are down about $100,000. One thing we'll notice over here, a very small revenue here, which is other revenue, and we see kind of a little bump down there. And we were up over budget in this particular other revenue sector, $530,000. And the reason for that primarily is interest earnings. As we all know, we've had some bumps in the interest rate, so we have been a benefactor of that. Our rents and leases are up, and that is due to the community center activity. That's where those revenues go, for the leasing of the community center, go into rents and leases. And also another one that we've had is we're receiving on our procurement card, we get the rebate, and that has gone up quite a bit as we've used those procurement cards more and more. So we're starting to see that rebate become more substantial. On the expenditure side, it's good. The blue is the budget. The green bar is how much was actually spent, and we don't see any red there. So everybody stayed within budget. We had some additional funds in the police department. Again, that's due to the hiring and the timing of the hiring. But everything else, most things were pretty close. But the big one was police. But of course, that's the biggest budget also. Are there any questions on that portion? Okay.
Councilmember Wales.
You said earlier that we've been slow in hiring police, and I think that's because we're so picky. And that the grant that we're getting is for 3 years. So if it takes us half a year to get the police officers that we are entitled to, do we get the full grant amount and it moves into maybe the 3rd and a half year?
Yes.
We do.
Yes.
So it's not in our best interest just to quickly hire.
Right.
For the sake of hiring, it's to
It's
maintain our regular.
reimbursement. It's reimbursement basis. There probably is a sunset out there after so many years, but if they see us moving
Good.
towards that goal.
Right. Thank you.
Councilmember Pelosi.
Are you on page 4 in your presentation?
I can be.
Well, I don't, I have a question then on page 4. And this is under the very top of page 4. The last sentence of the paragraph, it says, these increases were mostly seen in equipment repair and replacement expenditures for fleet vehicles. I've been on the council now 15 years, and it seems to me that the fleet vehicle, I've never seen a presentation on how many vehicles we have, when do we discharge a vehicle for a new vehicle. I'd like to see a study session agenda item on the fleet. How do we handle it? When do we buy new ones?
I believe there was a presentation by the police a short while back that actually explained all of the duration that they keep the vehicles when they replace them and things of that nature.
How many vehicles we have and all that?
I believe it did, yes. But, you know, I'm sure that
How far back was it, Bob?
Maybe a year, Shelley?
We did talk a little bit about our ER&R and the ad hoc committee. So not all the council members, if they were to attend, we talked about that. And every vehicle has a lifespan. There is a maintenance or a special file for every vehicle, and it has the maintenance on that vehicle, when we think we're going to have to replace it. It has a lifespan. Depending on the type of vehicle, it could be 2 or 3 years, or it might be 10 years. Police cars tend to be shorter in lifespan, and we take a replacement and a cost to components to the rate, replacement and ER&R, or maintenance and repair.
Councilmember Wales.
It might be interesting, not right away, but sometime in the future, to look at that issue of the total fleet, to look at maybe doing some leasing, and also to look at I've talked to the chief a little bit about the concept of the pros and cons of certain police officers being able to take their vehicles home. So that, maybe in the next year or so, that might be something that we want to look at again as things change.
I know that the presentation that was given included the police vehicles, the M&O vehicles, and basically the entire fleet. So it even included, I believe, the mayor's car,
Yeah.
and what the lifespan that they've got for each one of those, I believe. But that would probably be a good idea to have a refresher on that.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Well, plus we have Larry here, so it'd be a good refresher for you as well. Yeah.
He brings his motorcycle in.
We'll include that.
Councilmember Wales.
Some of our agencies that are more predictable, or have departments that are really predictable, are looking at leases. I know the Pierce County Public Health is looking at leases, so it wouldn't hurt us to look at all of that again and just see how the market's changed possibly.
You bet. Yeah, I think the lease purchase analysis is a good thing to do from time to time, especially with the way things are going, revenues now coming in from other sources. So, yeah, we'll put that down as a possible thing for another study session.
And the issue of police cars, because there's mixed things out there regarding police officers taking their vehicles home, or, I'd like to look at those pros and cons.
Okay. Councilmember Pelosi.
Yeah, I would like to see what other cities do to their police. It's not a bad idea having police cars out in neighborhoods, as an incentive for crime, reduction of crime. I don't know. What?
Well, one thing I know the chief has stated, that there are some cities in the area that are moving to take home vehicles. And you talk about that, and that's different from lease versus purchase or take home vehicles. And the officers that live in the city in particular, and I can defer to O'Neill over there.
Did you want to chime in on that?
But they don't necessarily want to park an Auburn police car in their driveway.
Oh.
Yeah.
I see why.
Well,
I think the chief has referred to that.
I think that we kind of need to look at that issue, because I know that we've got other police officers that park in ours and just investigate it. Yeah.
And I do get probably at least once a week a phone call or an email from companies that are very interested in doing an analysis for us, and they'll finance that lease for us. So so there's a lot of resources out there. And again, I would caution about how we went about doing that study, lease versus purchase.
Yeah.
Councilmember Swain.
Having done a few of those studies with my old agency, you run 3 shifts in a police department. So the minute you go to take home cars, you have to triple the size of your fleet. And right now, we, to use an old Navy term, we hot bunk the cars. They bring them in off the street, and the next shift goes out in them. And so it's going to increase your initial cost, but and it also is a union or guild negotiated issue. It's considered a labor benefit. So we have to kind of defer to the management of the police department on this question.
Councilmember DeCoursey.
Shelley, do we have a fleet manager, or is it handled by each individual
We
department?
do. We have a fleet manager, works with Randy Bailey.
Okay.
Any other questions? Councilmember Wales.
Just a statement, I think it just would be helpful for everyone to review the contracts, the concerns of the different groups, and how much it would cost to change and whether it's even worth it or not. I know I get concerns from citizens who see the number of police cars that are behind the fence, and so the more information would help us kind of set that aside and understand the total picture.
We'll look at our projected agenda for the next few
Well, I said
study sessions and
next year, so.
see how that goes. Okay, any other questions?
Next year.
Thank you, Shelley.
Where are you
Okay,
going?
yeah,
Continue.
Okay. Just going over some things that, look at our chart. Let's look at our charts. And this is just looking at that original chart that shows revenues versus expenditures through the end of the year. And notice we were very close in our overall revenues to our budget. And as always, this is not outside the norm. We do underspend our budget, which is a good thing. Property tax.
Councilmember Pelosi, have a
Under
question.
the enterprise funds on page 5, the second paragraph, third line, during which the city purchased water from the city of
Yes.
Tacoma. How much did we purchase and what was the cost?
Quite a bit. I don't know the volume, but it was a couple $1 million. Yeah. No, in 2016. Couple million. And we didn't have to purchase, we had wells down, and during 2016, yeah. It was a
So
substantial.
Why did we have to buy water from Tacoma?
We didn't have maybe
Lisa Tobin, Utilities Manager. We had several of our well supplies down, and while we were in the process of rebuilding them and putting them back in operation, during the hot summer months, we had to buy water from Tacoma to supplement our supply and also to fulfill our contract requirements with our wholesale customers, which are Algona and Water District 111 at that time. So in 2015 and 16, we were purchasing water from Tacoma. In 2016, we managed to get our supplies back online and were able to stop those purchases. And in 2017, there was only one very short period of time during a really hot spell where we had to buy additional water while we were busy putting the rest of our supplies back online. I am pleased to report that all of our supplies are now back online and functioning, and we do not anticipate any additional Tacoma expenditures.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks.
See, I was ready for you, council member. I had it highlighted and flagged.
Way to go, Shelley.
'Cause I knew somebody.
I fell asleep reading this last night.
I don't- It's supposed to be
Shelley did her
riveting.
job.
Yeah.
Property taxes, they came in right as budgeted. They always do. Very stable form of income. And we focused, for all council members, a refresher, spend quite a bit of time focusing on the revenues, because the expenditures are what the expenditures are. We have contracts in place, we have salaries and benefits that we have to pay, and it's very important that we monitor the revenues and make sure that we are able to sustain those that we thought we were going to receive to support all of our activities. Should these revenues fall and start going in a different direction, we'll need to sit up and take notice, because we have to think about how, why that's happening and what we're going to do about it. So that's just a little primer why general fund revenues are really important.
Councilmember Pelosi.
Page 6. The 4th line down, increase in new construction and the use of banked capacity. What does banked capacity mean?
Council member, we had what was bank capacity for many, many years, and it's property tax that the city could levy as long as there's two restrictions. There's the millage rate, or the cost per thousand of assessed value, and then there's also the maximum amount of dollars that you can levy. And we didn't levy the maximum amount of dollars that we could levy for many reasons. One thing, we were kind of waiting on that. We were looking for when some of our other revenue sources are going away, and we could use that to help use that bank capacity to help offset the loss of those revenues. And that bank capacity was created when we did some annexations 10 years ago. And we've used it over the years. We've gotten into it. We wanted to expand programs or hire some staff. We have levied some of that bank capacity to support the new programs or the new staff. We levied all the bank capacity last year, so now there is no bank capacity. So that has gone away.
Is that treated more like a reserve than?
Yes, yes. Some cities that annexed early, that's where some of that was created from the annexation, and also from the fire district, or creating the fire authority. A lot of that bank capacity was created then, and the city did not use it. Some of the other cities that have in our area around us, that they've also now levied all that bank capacity. Kent just did for this year. They've levied all the bank capacity from their annexation and their fire authority. And Renton did several years ago. They levied all their bank capacity for, not their fire authority, because they just formed that, but from their annexation. So there's a couple of things that have created that bank capacity over the years. And
Shelley, is the bank capacity an element of a line item in on plus side, minus side? Do we keep track of a bank capacity definition somewhere?
no, because it's not our money until we levy it, so it's not ours. We have the ability, the council has the ability to go out and levy that, but until such a time, it's like two birds in the bush, I guess. It'd be kind of not a bird in the hand. And so once it's levied, we have it, and it's gone. And we have shown that bank capacity on our revenue presentations and other presentations throughout the last 10 years, how much bank capacity was available should we need it. And this shows you the property tax revenues over the last 5 years. You can see it's marching up there, and where some of that's new construction, and that comes on. Some of it was where we got into the bank capacity.
Councilmember Wales.
Thank you. Can you give us an estimate, rough estimate of what percentage assessed valuation increases of some of the homeowners, the general homeowners in Auburn have received?
I would have to direct you to King County, because we're really, Auburn, the city levy is a very small, it's 14 cents of the dollar. I think that's what we have, it's about 14 cents of the dollar. To look at the whole thing, you've got to look at the school. You've got to look at the school and the state and the county levies too. We're not.
Peanuts.
Yeah, we're peanuts compared to the rest.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, this is sales and use tax, net of revenue from construction. Again, all the revenue from construction goes into the local street fund. And if you look at the lines here, and this is something that we've been talking about, this is this year, and you see how close we were to last year. And when I look at sales tax revenue, net of new construction, this is concerning to me. There's been very little growth. This is a large revenue. It's about $15 million now. So it's about 22–23% of our general fund budget. And when it's growing 1 or 2% and our expenditures are growing 3% or greater with contracts and other things in this economy, this could get limiting. And this is something that I really like to watch. So I will look forward to the first quarter 2018 and see how this revenue looks. But this to me doesn't look great. And this is one of the things that is concerning and council should be thinking about.
Well, with our budget period coming up shortly, it's going to be an interesting and involved situation to look at. Councilmember Brown.
Yes, and so seeing the sales tax not growing during a time when the economy in general is growing, I mean, could we speculate as to perhaps brick and mortar not performing relative to the digital retail?
Well, we do have in here, we do have a page that shows where it's coming from. And actually, it's page 85 of 106. In my, probably not of your packet, but my presentation. And we have been doing really well in new construction. We're growing more than, this is just what goes to the general fund. The new construction piece is growing. But the other component that it was growing the best was automotive in Auburn last year. But we saw downturns in manufacturing, in transportation and warehousing, and services. And we watch these. And so we're waiting very patiently for the March sales tax return and to see, because this is when the Marketplace Fairness Act was supposed to take effect, and that's the sales tax on interstate. And we're going to be looking at a couple of companies to see. January would be we would receive the January report in March, so we can see what happened in January, if there was a bump in sales tax activity for those particular businesses. I don't think it's going to take off like burst out of the gate, but it'll grow, hopefully, over time. Also, again, going back to streamlined sales tax and the sourcing change 10 years ago, the city lost a great deal of potential. The city lost over $2 million. We're in the middle of the recession, and mitigation was set when we're in the middle of the recession. And we've lost all that growth. Not only, we're still being mitigated for 1.9 million, over 1.9 million of a 2.1 million loss 10 years ago. And not only are we held to that, all those businesses that are doing this activity here in Auburn that we're no longer receiving sales tax on are growing. We've lost all that growth over the last 10 years. So that $2 million in Kent, they're being mitigated $4.5 million. And we talked about this last time. The Puget Sound Regional Council did a study, and they figured that $4.5 million is parlayed into about $12 million today that they don't get. Our sales and use tax, non-construction, it's retail and some services, but I'm anxious to see what the online sales activity for January's been, to see if there's a trend or something starting to pop up. This is, okay, now this is where we are doing very well. This is the budget. I think it was about 1.75 million last year, somewhere in that neighborhood. And you can see that we actually received up towards about 2.6 million. And all the construction around town, we're doing very well. And here's the growth on the construction revenue over the years. This is the first year that we took the sales tax on construction and put it to the fund, this Save Our Streets Fund, the city street program. Prior to that, we just took $2 million of property tax every year and plugged it in there. And I wanted some of the, I recommended that we go with the stability of the property tax versus the unknown or the cyclical nature of the sales tax on construction. Utility taxes are right on what we anticipated them to be. And you can see again, these are about $10 million a year, and this is both the city utility tax on our city-owned utilities as well as telephone, gas, electricity, and cable. And those are pretty flat, stable, but flat.
So I have seen a whole bunch of cell towers crop up around the city recently. I wonder why that is.
That are,
Yeah, there's short ones and tall ones. Who would be able to give us a briefing on that?
probably IT or Public Works, whoever's managing the franchise for
cell towers?
for cellular communications throughout the
Yeah,
city.
well, there's two people involved in that. Amber does the franchise agreements, but Josh does the actual lease agreements with.
These aren't necessarily on our property, they're just cell
No,
towers.
they're on
Private property.
private property, yeah. Just seems like they're cropping up.
If they're in a
I'm
right-of-way.
sorry, I'm going to defer to Josh and Amber on that. If it's on private property, I don't know
No,
if the
there's
city
nothing-
has anything to do with it.
Yeah. And I'm talking about that in the right-of-way.
Yeah, so in the right-of-way, they're covered by franchise, and so we go through a permit process that Amber goes through with them whenever they go to put those in the right-of-way. And there are very few new ones that have been put in the right-of-way recently. Most of what you're seeing is actually on private property,
Yeah.
and that gets regulated through community development, through the permitting and temporary use process through them.
Yeah, we were driving somewhere in town yesterday, and my wife says, "Wow, look at that tower. That's new." It was downtown area.
Exciting life.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I understand that it's good, good income though.
Yep. We have some on our water towers and various locations around town. So we get some rental revenue. Mostly the utilities get that. Okay, so that's utility tax, cable franchise fee, 5% on all the cable profits. We've been receiving this for quite some time. Again, over the 5 years, we've had about a $200,000 growth in that revenue stream. This is the new cable utility tax. We're getting a smidge more than we thought we were going to get, so it's coming in over budget. The last payment for the year was received in January, and since this is cash basis, it'll be accrued back in when we do our GAAP accounting. Business licenses. That's an interesting chart, isn't it?
Different.
Yeah. These come in primarily, they're billed in the November, late November, December. They come in December and January, mostly. And 5-year tracking. I'm going to guess that if we were to look at the first 3 months of 2018, you would see some more revenue. I didn't check that today, didn't get around to it. I normally do to see if they're there, but I suspect that we'll see January, February revenues that are probably higher. Building permits, here's your, we talked about this earlier. This is the one that went red. The shaded area is the budget. The dark line is what we actually received, and the dotted line was last year. I think that tells the story. You can see that they're up, they're down, they're up, they're down. Where they're going, I don't always know. Intergovernmental revenues, these are state shared revenues and grants that we receive. Charges for services. Where our plan, our culture and recreation, development service, our public safety. This is where we have the contracted guild officers out, and they are paid through a contract that the city enters into with the business or person contracting their help. Development service fees, again, like permit revenue, you can see the shaded areas, the budget, the dark line is this year, the dotted line was last year. Trending down. Culture and recreation, steady Eddie, they're right on.
Way to go, Daryl.
Budget, yeah. We've got that revenues, those revenue streams pretty well nailed down. You can see moderate growth over the last 5 years, about 20%.
Councilmember Wales.
I know that, oh, thank you. I know at the time that we were looking at the events, the community center, that we were playing around with the fees and what it was going to take to entice people to come and usage and how we were going to break even. Sometime it would be nice to have a report to show how high the attendance is and the number of people that are participating. Because that's worked out really well. Because I remember back when we were worrying about movable chairs and enough silverware and all those kinds of issues, and it
Yeah, we
looks
can
like
separate one out by rentals and program activity, and I think we're finding some things are more successful, like the rentals, and some things are costing a little more, like teen programs, because they're so successful, they end up costing more. So we could put together a presentation in the future on that.
Fines and penalties, those are right on.
Councilmember Pelosi.
Third item down on that chart,
Which one are we on?
red flex photo enforcement. Why is that still being talked about when we don't use it?
Well, primarily, we received some revenues in 2016 on that, and we've got a few that we've received this year. We've got some little ones trickling in where we're still receiving a little bit of revenue.
Really?
Yeah. Red Flex is out of it. If anybody pays, the city now gets 100% of it. So as you can see, we had like $11,000 come in this year.
Yeah.
So that's why we have it on there, because we're
Okay.
still receiving some. It will go away.
Yep.
Eventually. And you can see where the contract ended. Miscellaneous revenues, we talked about this. This is our rentals over at our wonderful community center. This is also some interest that we now have a little more interest. I think we're up around 1.5% in the state pool. We have the new investment program. We've put some money out with Opus Bank, who gives us about 8 basis points over the state pool. And we are looking at now doing some ladders and getting into some agencies, developing a little investment program. Again, we're a small city. Cities of Seattle and Tacoma, they have a whole investment or treasury department and have people that are just watching these numbers and keeping everything invested, and we just don't have the resources to do that. So what we like to do is keep it simple, keep it easy. We keep money in the state pool. We're getting a little bang for our buck at Opus Bank, and we're going to start laddering into some agencies. But it's really hard to buy an agency, which is a bond from Federal Home Loan Bank, Fannie Mae, when they're only maybe 10 basis points over the T-bill. And when we're getting about that from Opus Bank, but, you know, so it's, you have to manage that investment then. So we're looking at some things that we can do to maybe make our investment program a little more robust and get some leverage off of the cash, idle cash that we have that's not earning so much. But we're very limited in what we can invest in. So more to come on that.
Low-risk investments, I presume.
It's government securities, that's about it.
Okay.
That's all we can be in. And when we did the investment policy, we even put, if we go and do other local governments, other than the U.S. government, if we want to buy, say, another city's bonds or something, we have minimum ratings that we expect those bonds to have with S&P, Fitch, I don't know if we have S&P and Moody's. We have minimum ratings that those bonds have. Nothing B, it all has to be A or better. Real estate excise tax. You hear us talk about operating revenues and capital revenues and operating budgets and capital budgets. Real estate excise tax is a capital revenue, and it needs to be spent on capital expenses. There was a few years when times were tough, the legislature relaxed on that a bit and let us use it for maintenance on facilities that were built with these funds. But this is the money that we look to do capital, and also we use it to match road grants. Right now, we use about $1 million of it a year to service the debt on the annex building, to service the debt on the LRF, local revitalization funding that did this project out here. And we also have a Public Works Trust Fund loan, a small one that we're using real estate excise tax to pay the debt on that. So when you look at the money here and you see, I think we got what, 2.5 million or something this year, or 3.5 million. That $1 million of that money, when you look at this chart, here it is. Why don't I just turn it right? Yeah, we got 3.6. $1 million of that is earmarked for the next at least 20 years. So, and again, this is a very cyclical revenue. And you can see it's growing considerably. We had, when some big properties flip or turn, what you see, and I'm interested to see what happens in the new tax law, because when a property is depreciated, fully depreciating, a new holding company is set up, and the holding company will sell it to the new holding company so they can start the depreciation over. And so we get the real estate excise tax in those deals. A lot of the multifamily places, you'll see that. A lot of the big businesses, like Lake Taps Marketplace up there, flipped a couple of years ago now. That may not be a holding company, that might be another corporation that came in and bought it. I don't know the details, but we do see properties turn as things get fully depreciated. So here you go, pet licensing. But this is all behind us now. It's all behind us. It's water under the bridge. Now AVHS, as of I think 2 weeks ago, they're selling our licenses. We sell licenses here in the annex and also down at ABHS at the Humane Society. And they can be purchased online. People can go out online and get their pet license, a new one or renewed. This is a marketing piece, everybody. You can go out there online, get it renewed, and they'll be present at a lot of events around town selling licenses. There's also, this is more for the who may be watching or watch this on TV, but there's also a tool on their website, on AVH's website, where you can see if your residence is in the city, if your address is actually in the city versus the county, and whether you need to purchase a license.
Yeah.
Councilmember Pelosi.
No, go ahead, Councilmember Pelosi.
Oh, my God.
Okay, I'll go first. No.
I read Dana Hinman's update last Friday, and she mentioned the transfer of the pet licensing wholly now to the shelter folks.
I think I provided her that piece.
And they've been working on that for quite a while. So let's see how they perform.
Yeah, they've hired someone, very nice, well-qualified person to run that program. And we have very high hopes.
So maybe more emphasis will improve licensing.
Councilmember Wales.
Will we be able to, now that we've kind of separated from them from the licensing piece, will we be able to get any data from them so that we can see how they're doing, or are we just going to do this on a wing and a prayer?
No, they're required to provide us, this data that you see here comes from our former provider, Pet Data.
Okay.
And they are using Pet Pro. It's a software, and they're required to provide us this information also. So this should not change, and maybe even we'll have some better reports.
Councilmember
Yeah,
Pelosi.
when I was at the last National League of Cities, Pet Pro had a booth there, and I spoke to them, and so.
Okay. And the next three funds that we're going to talk about are our street funds, our arterial street fund, our city street fund, and our arterial street preservation fund. And Fund 1 and 2 is the granddaddy. That's the oldest of all the street funds that we have. This is where all the arterial street construction happens, other than the new construction, the rebuilds versus the preservation. This is a heavy grant fund. This is where our federal grants go through, and where projects are going.
Just to clarify, we don't include the grants in our budget, do we?
Oh, we do.
We do.
Oh, yes.
Are they separately identified?
They are identified. If you go into the budget, you will see federal grants. They're not broken down by the agency type, but if you'd like to see that, we do have that information.
I just wanted to be sure, because some of those grants are not just real money, so to speak, until we get them, right?
Correct. These are all reimbursement based. The
It's a
work must be
forecast,
done. Yeah.
anyway.
You probably remember that about every 3 years, we bring an interfund loan request through here, and the purpose of that is for these special revenue funds, especially the street projects. Should we get so far ahead of the cash we have in the fund, we have a loan set up to transfer money from the general fund or the capital projects fund over another fund over to the street fund until such a time that grant comes in. I can't remember a time, though, that we've actually had to do that, but we do have that interfund loan in place for
It's our
intermittent.
fallback position, right?
Right, it's kind of the belt and suspenders approach.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes, Shelley, could you tell me why the difference between what was budgeted and what was spent between 17, or in 2017, in the capital project expenditures?
Well, we budget full, like the project's going to go.
Right.
And many times there's circumstances that happen where the construction window doesn't match up to when we think it's going to happen. There could be right-of-way concerns. There could be, on one project, and Ingrid probably has a list as long as from here to across the room, where we've gone out for bid, and the bid was much higher than the engineer's estimate, so we needed to come back and regroup because we didn't have the funding in place to do all the work. So there's a litany of things that could go on, but we budget full. The project should go, and what you're going to see are these costs and the revenues that are associated with these costs. And our first budget amendment of this year, budget amendment number 5, that we'll be looking at in a couple of weeks, you're going to see a lot of these dollars rolled forward into this year to continue on with the project. But this is pretty normal.
That makes sense.
And this is the city street fund, the 103 fund. This is working in the neighborhoods. A lot of these are overlay and other projects. This is where we've been receiving all that sales tax money on construction. And then the last one is the preservation fund. This one got delayed because the grant was delayed, if I recall. And so it didn't get started when we had anticipated it would get started. Oops. Water revenues versus water sold. This is the water sold, these are the revenues. Put some new graphs in here. This is our, Councilmember Pelosi will like these. These are our waste streams, and we show.
Love that.
Yeah.
It should be called waste pies.
Waste pie. Yeah, so this, I wanted to start reporting on these to show what our diversion rate was. And it says yard waste, but that's really compostables. And we'd like to have the diversion rate to be up around 70, 80%. Those are our goals. The multifamily, we have some work to go. This is a tough one. This has always been, we do a lot of education out here with multifamily. This has always been a tough one. And commercial.
Councilmember Pelosi.
So I was at a meeting Friday with Joan Nelson, and I'm going to be writing an article in the Council Corner for this next week, because now we have an outlet for latex paint. I was telling you, John, about that. So I did some research today talking with a Kent Green Sheen, talking to the general manager about their goals for future. So I'm going to cover all that in a Council Corner, but it'll be interesting. Now we can get rid of the old latex paint we have in our garage at relatively inexpensive cost for us to do it. So I'm really bullish about that. The state legislature blew it. They couldn't get off their rear end to do anything about that for the last 5 years. So now private people have come in and are working the problem for the state.
They recognize the issue and step to the fore.
Yeah.
Good. Councilmember.
Councilmember Pelosi, what do the private companies do with the latex paint? Do they break it down into its chemical components?
Yeah, they break it down. It's all, it's not oil-based, of course. They break it down and they'll be ending up with 17 different colors that you can go and buy. Recycled paint at a lower cost. A gallon of paint now, a good gallon is what, 40 bucks roughly? So you're gonna see it about 20 bucks a gallon. Plus, it's being recycled, so.
Great.
Portland has a recycled plant down there that I toured. It was a National League of Cities, Green Cities Conference, part of NLC. And they're gonna set up the same thing in Kent, same thing. Yeah, we're fortunate to have it so close. And AgriShop will be a distributor. You can take your paint down, pay them whatever it is, and it'll be in my article what it is. And
That'll be a good service.
oh, God.
Let's see, is that I guess that's the end of my charts. But cemetery, we have the revenue and expense chart in there, and the revenue line is above the expense line, which I don't seem to have in this. So we're back. Were there any other questions? There's An investment sheet attached. Again, we're not meeting the 6-month treasury rate yet because those rates have been on the rise and we can't keep up with it. We lag behind it. But in the falling rate environment, we tend to earn more because we have longer term investments out there that we're earning more than the current treasury rate. So it's up and down.
Any other questions for Shelley?
Good report.
Thorough, good report.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, at this point in the meeting is when we turn to our municipal services focus group. And we will turn the meeting over to Councilmember Larry Brown.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. So the item A, airport discussion, it's Ingrid, right on time.
So for the record, Ingrid Gaub, Assistant Director of Engineering, City Engineer. So my understanding is in one of the council meetings in January, there was a request made to kind of review what is the capital project plans for the airport that we have. So what I've included in the packet is basically the current CFP that we went through with the updates to it last year for the council. So my thought process was we just kind of walk through what those projects are and then see what questions you all have on them. So the first one on there is the runway enhancement. This is certainly the largest project that we have out at the airport. This is for extending the length of the actual runway itself. The current runway is about 3,400 feet. And the plan that was approved in the master plan for the airport was to try to get that to about 4,000 lineal feet. And we have completed the environmental assessment process for that, and we are currently working with FAA on design process for that project. Unfortunately, since the master plan, the ADO staff at FAA has changed, and they were not quite part of the master planning process where we got to the 4,000 lineal foot runway. So we're having to do a little backtracking with them to try to get to that point again. So we are going through some significant conversations with FAA staff at the airport district's office to discuss what that final length of runway is. So with that, that's slowing down that design process a little bit for the actual design of the runway, and it may delay when we actually get the construction started. We were originally shooting for about September, October for starting construction this year. And that may push into next year.
Councilmember Pelosi.
Ingrid.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Stepped on your toes again.
Ingrid, can you explain why the FAA is giving us pushback now? Did I hear that they weren't involved at the beginning?
So no, so FAA was involved during the master planning process. We actually went through an additional 9-month, I think, process in getting the master plan approved with the FAA. The staff at the airport district office for our area was not part of the staff at that time, so they weren't involved in that master planning process. So we're having to do a little backtracking with them and go through some of that discussion and justification for what that runway length is for the airport. In addition, so there's a little bit of a difference between how FAA funds capital projects for airports versus what we ultimately want to do in the master plan to get to that 4,000 lineal foot runway. The AIP program, which is the grant program, basically looks at what do you need for the airport today based upon its current use today. It's not necessarily looking to fund economic development type improvements to the airport. So that's part of where the issue is that 4,000 lineal foot is in our master planning is also tied to potentially the economic development of the airport. It's also tied to safety improvements for the airport users that are out there today. So it's a conversation that needs to happen with that airport district office.
Thank you.
So the next project on the list is the Jet A fueling facility. This is the actual permanent facility, which was planned to be in place after the airport extension is actually completed, because that would be when we would see potential increase in demand for Jet A type fueling. So that's the jet fuel for the smaller planes. We have in there an annual repair and replacement for facilities at the airport. So we've talked about this before with the condition assessment that we're currently in the process of doing, that we need some sort of money in place to deal with some of the issues that keep cropping up every year. So that's kind of what that fund is. We have plans out toward the end of the 6-year cycle to do the automated weather observation system. So that's for assistance with air travel for the clients that actually use the airport. And then in 2019, we have some plans to do some upgrading for our airport security cameras and our gate access to the airport, and to look at some improvements there. The precision approach path indicator plan for 2022, again, that is improvements to air traffic and use of the actual runway, which pilots can probably explain better than I can. But and then we have in there as well land acquisition for future approaches. So the first one we have is actually budgeted for this year. This is for the purchase, it ties into the airport runway enhancement, and it's a partial purchase of a piece of the park and ride from Metro in order for us to create the runway safety area at the end of the proposed extension to the runway. So that we first need to purchase the property, and then in 2019, the plan is to go and do the improvements to remove some of the obstructions that are in that runway safety area and actually smooth out that ground.
Yes, Councilmember West.
Thank you. It says that we've received a grant for $527,000 approximately. What did we receive a grant from?
So all of that is through FAA, because this has to do with the runway extension. It's not, this is one property type of purchase that they will fund. If it has to do for economic development, additional land area for hangars or other things, FAA will not fund those.
Thank you.
And so in later years, you have additional purchase for, again, improving the RPZ, the runway protection area for the runway. And then Project 9 on there is the west side fencing. So this is for completing the fencing along the west side of the property. We have an area over there that's wetland property that we need to enclose and fence. And that's currently what is in that 6-year plan.
Anybody have any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Palisa.
So let's go back to Jet A fuel. It's on page 95 and 106. So why don't you brief the council on the temporary?
Sure. So we had a conversation last year talking about what we could potentially do as a temporary way of addressing Jet A fuel at the airport before we were able to actually fund and build in the permanent Jet A fuel facility. So we have been in conversations with Cascade out at the airport, one of our FBOs, our fixed base operators. And they actually have acquired a fuel truck and are planning to be able to provide Jet A fuel for their customers that actually they do service on helicopters. And then we will be doing an amendment with AMG, our contract management out at the airport, for them to be able to actually utilize that truck to service airport customers and provide Jet A fuel, so that we will get basically known for having Jet A fuel at the airport without having to do the full capital outlay of having a full tank and everything else at the site. So this will help us understand better what that demand is for Jet A fuel, and especially as we do the runway extension and that demand increases, then we can better plan for that future project.
Thanks.
That's it.
Thank you very much. I think we hand it back to you, sir.
Thank you. That was short and sweet.
It wasn't bad.
Sorry for my interruption.
No problem, sir.
I'll get some duct tape. Okay, any other discussion items? New business. We have a need for an executive session tonight, and I will defer to, yes, Councilman Holman.
With the council's approval, would it be best that we do our matrix first, so then we break into executive session and would only have to come back to adjourn rather than do our matrix after returning? It's the council's pleasure.
Is that acceptable? Okay. Looking at the matrix, we still have a few TBDs on there.
those.
Yep. Let's go ahead and show those both for 423 right now. We have a meeting with staff on April 2nd to kind of look over the agenda and if we need to move or add anything. We'll know at that time.
And which one, the
This
first
is
one?
on the first and the third one, so number 1 and number 4.
What are those dates again?
423, the same as the Community Sustainability Series.
423, and that's also 423. Well, I can't write on this paper.
Slick.
And 423. Got it. Okay. Municipal services. We did that one tonight, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
And court fees.
Go ahead and, got a date planned for that yet, sir?
Okay. Health and Human Services. Any word in Yolanda's absence?
No, I mean, the dates that we have for the two there are fine, and the other one, we're just waiting for a date.
Okay. And last but not least, finance, economic development.
If you'll remember, King County imposed a new fee upon unincorporated Auburn. We have 3 pieces that they are charging us for because their sewer lines, utility lines, run through unincorporated Auburn, and they charge us for, running our sewer lines through unincorporated King County that's within our, that's a very small amount. But what I proposed is make this a moot charge by annexing those, at least 2 of those 3 areas. And we can do that because they are islands or peninsulas within our boundaries. And we can do that on a councilmatic decision. And I would really like to have that added to the matrix for our discussion.
What kind of title would you want to put on that?
Annexation.
Annexation,
Okay.
small parcel annexation. None of these are more than 5 square blocks.
Any thoughts as to a date when you'd like to?
It all depends on when we can get together. It's going to take a team of various departments to,
So we'll put-
primarily legal, I would
Now for
think.
TBD for now?
To be determined, yeah.
Okay.
But I'd like to get it there as a placeholder. I know that it's something that we've been looking at for several years, and perhaps we discuss it this year.
This is the time.
What about
I
the
think so.
cost of service study? Anything on that one?
I don't have a date yet.
Livable cities?
I don't have a date.
All right. All right.
We had a little change of directorship there, and it's going to take a few days, a few weeks to recast.
Anything else for the special focus areas on the matrix? Okay.
Thank you for indulging me. request.
Okay, good request. City attorney.
Okay, before we go into executive session, we have to announce the purpose for the executive session and the approximate time. And because this is a study session, there wouldn't be any action taken on returning back to the council chambers. Is this something that you're thinking 20 minutes? Or
20 minutes, yeah, should be sufficient.
And as I understand, it's a complaint against a public official?
Yes.
What, I didn't hear you. What's the subject?
A complaint against a public official and 20 minutes. No action to be followed. No action to take, follow after the council returns.